Welcome back to another edition of Dave Smith Unleashed, and isn't this a great time of the year, man? I can't wait. We are just around the corner from my favorite sport, college football, and my second favorite sport, the National Football League, and boy, it has been a dry spell, hasn't it? It's, wow. Over the last month and a half, there has been absolutely nothing to watch on television when it comes to sports. You know, I've taken to watching. I was looking up series that might look interesting. I watched Sneaky Pete all 3 seasons. I'm watching The Gilded Age right now. I watched The Nick. I'm looking at documentaries on Netflix. Anything to fill the time until football starts, because we are in, as my father used to say, the Gobi Desert right now when it comes to sport. This is the worst time of the year, but we're only a couple of weeks away from the best time of the year. Dave Smith and Dave Smith Unleashed. And once again, thanks to all of you who subscribed out there. We are inching up and close to the 3,000 mark in subscribers. And so make sure you give us a like. Make sure you give us a comment on the YouTube page. And, of course, always share once you decide to subscribe. So we appreciate it. We appreciate it as the show grows. We've got a great lineup of guests coming up in the next month. And if you want to know who the guests are going to be, if you want to know when the shows are going to be airing here on Dave Smith Unleashed on YouTube, make sure you go to my Twitter account, or X, at Dave Sports God, at Dave Sports God. I'm always posting about when the shows are going to be on, who the guests are going to be, what time they're going to be on. So check with that, and you'll know. And, of course, go to YouTube and look up Dave Smith Unleashed, and don't miss an episode as we continue to grow by leaps and bounds. You know, speaking of college football and speaking of the National Football League, I'm watching with great interest this Shedeur Sanders situation in Cleveland with the Browns. And we all know that he was a highly touted prospect coming out of high school, son of Deion, of course. Goes to Jackson State after Deion gets the job there. Now, of course, you look at Jackson State being a 1AA school, they would never have gotten a player the caliber of a Shedeur Sanders if not for Deion being the coach. And certainly, boy, another big surprise was getting Travis Hunter, who was the #1 recruit in America, recruited by everybody, and taken second in the draft here in 2025. And it looks like he's going to be playing both ways for the Jacksonville Jaguars and being a generational talent. The fact that he would go to a secondary, non-Division I school in Jackson State was another surprise, even though, you know, but he must love Deion. His parents must love Deion, and he was friends with Shedeur in high school. And, boy, it worked out for both of them, didn't it? Well, especially for Travis Hunter, who went second in the draft. And, you know, when you get a guy like him, he was the best receiver and the best defensive back in college football last year. So that's like getting 2  number-1 picks when you draft him. And now we have the case of Shedeur Sanders, who started out very well at Colorado. He had a good year his last year at Colorado here before he decided to try the National Football League. We didn't look at the numbers. I think the Buffaloes went 9-4 last year, which was the best year they've had in a long, long time. And he threw for over 4,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns and only 10 interceptions. So they did well, and he did well. And there was talk that, he's up for the Heisman Trophy, and that was the case before the season started. He's up for the Heisman Trophy. He could be the #1 pick in the National Football League draft. And, well, the funny thing is, after his last year at Colorado, when he was going to combines and working out, there was talk that he still might be the #1 pick in the draft, or maybe the second pick, or certainly he would go in the first round. That was pretty much the consensus. And then things started to change. Now, why did things change for Shedeur? Interesting. Evidently, there were issues on the pre-interview draft process when you look at why he dropped to the 5th round. And when I watched him play at Colorado, he doesn't overwhelm you with talent. He's not the most talented quarterback I've ever seen. He has an average arm. He holds onto the ball way too long in the pocket and takes too many sacks. His body language isn't good when things aren't going well, and he has a tendency to blame his teammates when things go wrong, which are some things that I noticed about him. Now, he's a very good player. He's accurate. He can throw the deep ball, even though he doesn't have a great arm, and when he sets his feet and throws right away, he's pretty good. And I think he can be a good NFL quarterback. Maybe. We'll explain why coming up here in a few moments. But the big problem seemed to be when he was doing the pre-draft process, doing the interviews with National Football League teams. And there was one team that said he was going around sandbagging interviews with teams that he didn't want to play for. And he'd go in there and intentionally blow the interview and not give them the answers they wanted to hear in hopes that they wouldn't draft him. Now, that's okay if you're John Elway. That's okay if you're Dan Marino. That's okay, I guess, if you're Cam Ward. Or guys that are going to be taken number one on the draft. That's not okay if you have average athletic ability and an average arm like a Shedeur Sanders. And the word spreads like wildfire around the NFL. And boy, there's no league like the NFL when it comes to talking themselves out of drafting a kid. The kid could be thought of as a high number one pick, and then one rumor gets out, one bad interview, one bad combine, one bad pro day, and the word spreads like wildfire, and you can drop like a rock for seemingly no reason. Now, again, why would he drop all the way to the fifth round, though? That was interesting, wasn't it? And look at the quarterbacks that went ahead of him. Well, Cam Ward was the number one pick in the draft. And then after that, Tyler Shuck went to the New Orleans Saints. Dylan Gabriel went to the Browns. Jalen Milroe went to the Seattle Seahawks. A lot of quarterbacks went ahead of him. And you say, well, Dave, why would that be? Okay, did he sandbag the interviews? Maybe he did. I forgot about Jackson Dart. He went in the first round of the New York Giants, and that's a lot of people thought that's where Deion would go to the Giants. When they traded up to 25, people thought they were going to take Shedeur. Nope, Jackson Dart from Ole Miss, coached by Lane Kiffin. And now the R word is popping up with regularity. It's unbelievable how this works. The racism word has popped up. Now, how this is racism, I don't know, that he dropped to the fifth round. If all black quarterbacks were taken late, if teams were passing on all of them, if there was a concerted effort not to draft black quarterbacks in the National Football League, well, I could say, I'm with you. Yeah, maybe there's a racist element in the National Football League. But we all know that's not true. All NFL franchises and all NFL owners and coaches think are wins and losses. If you can produce on the field, they don't care what color you are because they want to keep their jobs. If you can produce wins, that's all they care about. Now, if there was indeed racism in the draft process, well, here's where we can knock that right down. Who was the number one quarterback taken in the draft this year in 2025? That's right. Cam Ward, formerly of Washington State, transferred to Miami and had a great year last year. Cam Ward was the first player taken in the draft by the Tennessee Titans. Well, Dave, what about other years? Okay, let's go to some other recent years. In 2024, the first two quarterbacks taken in the draft, Caleb Williams, number one by the Chicago Bears, Jaden Daniels, number two by the Washington Commanders. And Michael Penix Jr. from the Washington Huskies went number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. So 3 black quarterbacks in the top 10, including 1 and 2 last year, 2024. The number one pick in the draft this year, black quarterback Cam Ward, number 1. Well, let's go back to 2023. First pick in the draft, Bryce Young by the Carolina Panthers, black quarterback. Number 2 pick in the first round, C.J. Stroud, black quarterback by the Houston Texans. Number 4 pick in the draft, Anthony Richardson, black quarterback by the Indianapolis Colts. Let's do the numbers here. In 2025, let's see. Cam Ward, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, that's 4. Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. So that's 7 black quarterbacks in the last 3 years. And the last 3 number 1 picks were black quarterbacks. And 3 taken in the first 8 in 24, 3 taken in the first 4 in 23. So that ain't it. The reason Shedeur dropped into the 5th round had nothing to do with racism. So let's look at some of the reasons why. And I was doing a little bit of study and research on this, and something seemed to have gone terribly wrong during his pre-draft interview process when he went around going from team to team doing interviews. It wasn't the combine, I guess, and I don't think he did a lot of pre-draft workouts or combines or things, or pro days. And if he did, evidently he wasn't all that impressive. But here are some of the words that NFL scouts and coaches and personnel guys used after he did the series of pre-draft interviews. One team called him arrogant. Another called him unprofessional. A third called him brash. Another team called him disinterested. Another team called him entitled. A scout from the New York Giants said he was unprepared for the interview process. Maybe he was sandbagging them. Maybe he didn't want to play for the Giants. And a quarterback coach in the National Football League, well, this is a real indictment here. In all my years in the National Football League, that was the worst professional interview I have ever seen. So I guess, none of us were in the room. None of us know what really went on there. But going by these comments and going by the descriptions here, evidently, he kind of walked into the room a little arrogant, a little full of himself, a little entitled, I guess wearing a lot of jewelry and wearing different hats, and was expected to be treated like the number one pick in the draft, expected to be treated like an absolute superstar when he's not. He's not considered that way in the National Football League. And then, again, the accusation that he sandbagged interviews. He would go into some interviews and intentionally act disinterested and intentionally do a poor interview because he didn't want to go to that team. Now, that happens. Other quarterbacks have tried that. Have tried sandbagging and trying to get out of some place where they don't want to go. But evidently he did that. He did that many times in the interview process. Now, this is just my opinion here. I watched him play most of his games at Colorado. And again, average size, average arm. He's not a great athlete. He's not a guy who's going to break the pocket and run 80 yards for a touchdown. He holds on to the ball way too long. Takes a lot of sacks and doesn't seem, and his body language a lot of times to me looked poor when things weren't going well. His body language looked poor and doesn't take accountability and seemed to blame his teammates when things went wrong. Like a little bit more to say about that. But now it's time to pay some bills and take a break and hear from our great sponsor, MTS Transportations. Dave Smith Unleashed brought to you by MTS Transportations. And mention the Dave Smith Unleashed podcast and get 20% off on your next shipment for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs. There's only one business to call, and that's MTS Transportations at 800-640-6873. MTS Transportations, 800-640-6873. All right, thanks again to MTS Transportations. They're responsible for Dave Smith Unleashed being on there, so make sure for all your shipping, trucking, and freight needs, go to MTS Transportations. Again, I just don't think, if these stories are true, and I would assume they are, which is why he dropped down into the 5th round, he just isn't good enough to conduct himself that way moving forward. Now, he had 64 touchdowns and 13 interceptions, which is very good in his 2 years at Colorado. And they've been awful for years and years and years. They kind of turned it around last year. They were 9-4, 74%. He had a 74% completion percentage, 4,134 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So he had a very good year. Now, how does that translate to the NFL? Well, I think we're going to find out. And you know what was really interesting? This is why I despise the woke, cowardly, timid, politically correct media here that we have. I'll name some guys here in a moment. But Shedeur got the start in his first preseason game against the Carolina Panthers, and he did well. Credit to him. He was 14 out of 23 through 2 touchdown passes, no interceptions. Not bad until you consider that he was playing against, basic vanilla defenses, which is what teams do in the preseason. They're not going to show you anything that you can use on tape later in the season if they have to see you again. So they'll go cover 2, basic little zone defense, maybe a basic man-to-man. They're not going to show you anything complex or complicated where, and this was a problem for Shedeur in college. He wasn't a fast decision maker. He drops back, and if the first guy isn't open, then he holds onto the ball too long and he takes a sack. He's not really athletic enough to get away. So he took a lot of sacks because he's not a quick decision maker, doesn't have a quick release. So he was playing against vanilla basic defenses and against guys. Let's be honest about this. He's playing against guys who are going to be working at Costco in a couple of weeks. Not a lot of starters out there. So scrubs and guys who aren't really NFL players and basic vanilla defense. Again, I give him credit. He did well. 14 out of 23, 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. Now, they've got another game on Saturday against the Philadelphia Eagles, and evidently he left practice with a little bit of a strain in his oblique, and it says, quote, not likely to play Saturday against the Eagles. So I don't know if that means Dylan Gabriel. I don't know if that means Joe Flacco, the ancient one. I don't know if that means Kenny Pickett, but he's probably not going to play on Saturday. But the woke, cowardly media, this is you, ESPN. This is, oh my God, Skip Bayless. He put out a video blog after that preseason game, and he said, tonight showed that the NFL made a horrendous mistake with Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders was composed. He looked like an NFL superstar. He stood in there. He made the passes. He proved everybody wrong. He should have been the number one pick in the NFL draft. Remember, this is the same idiot who said Tim Tebow was an NFL Hall of Fame. Remember him, the way he used to talk about Tebow back in the day? Now, Skip Bayless is a moron. Whatever he says, the opposite will probably happen. Based on, he played about a half of a preseason game against vanilla defenses and guys who are going to be pumping gas in a couple of weeks. And based on that, Skip Bayless and the media, ESPN guys, I mean, why even play anymore? Shedeur should retire right now and never play a game in the National Football League. And based on that one half against scrubs from the Carolina Panthers, let's just give him that yellow jacket right now. That Canton Hall of Fame jacket. Let's build a bust of him and put it in Canton. So a bust of Shedeur Sanders and a yellow jacket for the Hall of Fame. This is the way the media are talking right now. It is absolutely ridiculous. No, he seems like a nice kid. I've never had the pleasure of interviewing him, but he seems to come across pretty well on interviews, and who knows what happened in those interview rooms. And I hope he does well. And you know what? It's my opinion that those flaws he had at Colorado can be corrected. If he humbles himself and puts in an enormous amount of film study, be the first guy at practice and the last guy to leave, and stays on that practice field forever and learns how to read defenses and get a little bit of a quicker release and you not hold on to the ball so long, and that will, all comes down to the coaching staff. I think he can be a pretty good NFL quarterback. Yeah, does he have an average NFL arm? Yes. But so did Tom Brady. So did Joe Montana. Fran Tarkenton said one time, every single year that he went to training camp, all the quarterbacks there had a better arm than him. You don't have to have a rocket or a cannon of an arm to be a great NFL quarterback. Now, was he in their class? Not likely. But I think he can be a starting quarterback and be pretty good. But for God's sake, one half of one game against a bunch of scrubs playing vanilla defense in a preseason game, and these media idiots have him ready for the Hall of Fame. Like I said, just retire right now, Shedeur, and in 5 years you'll be enshrined in Canton for one half of football against guys who'll be pushing shopping carts in 2 weeks that you were playing against. Wow. It is just unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah, it's the same kind of thing with Lamar Jackson back in the day. Now, you are listening to Dave Smith here, the biggest Lamar Jackson fan in the world. If you listened to me back in, I think it was 2018 when he was drafted, whenever it was, I was on the air every day. That was the draft with Josh Allen and who are the other quarterbacks? Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield and all the rest of these guys. And I said on the air every single day leading up to that draft, the Cleveland Browns should take Lamar Jackson with the first pick in the draft. He will be the best quarterback in this draft. And he's won, 2 MVPs since then? I've been proven right about him. He's the best quarterback in the draft. He'll be the fastest player on the field. He has a cannon for an arm. I used to see him throw deep balls at Louisville, 70 and 80 yards in the air, right on the money. Now, he wasn't accurate when he came into the NFL. And if you kind of contained him and, rushed the ends under control and made him throw those medium-range passes, he wasn't going to beat a good team. He's gotten much better at that over the years. Hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl yet, but I'm certain that he will. He's on a good team and he has a good coach. So I think eventually knocking on that door. Same thing with Josh Allen. I think the Bills will get to the Super Bowl eventually as well. But it was the same thing. Any criticism at all. If Lamar Jackson isn't the greatest quarterback in the National Football League, the greatest who ever lived, even the mildest of criticism, you are called a racist by the media. And it's funny, other black quarterbacks, that doesn't apply. You can criticize them. But for some reason, Lamar Jackson and now Shedeur Sanders kind of stand out for the rest. Don't you dare criticize them, you racist. So it was Lamar, and then it was now it's Shedeur. Now, here's another NFL scout about the draft process and the interview stuff where he evidently didn't do well. Quote, "We're more concerned with talent than anything off the field. The off-the-field stuff and the bad interviews are not an issue if he put together better game tape." So what he's saying is the game tape was not good at Colorado, at least not translating it to the National Football League. Not an issue if he put together better tape. And again, the words came: poor body language, no accountability, blaming his teammates, average arm, holds onto the ball too long, not a quick decision maker. Those are the criticisms of him. And again, I don't know what happened at these pre-drafts, but there's got to be something to it. Where he would go from the potential number one pick in the National Football League draft down to the 5th round. That has to be what it is. And let's not forget the Deion factor, shall we? See, this is another. Deion is an overwhelming presence. He's a force field. He is a guy who dominates a room when he walks in. And rightfully so. He's one of the greatest players in the history of the NFL, the best corner I've ever seen, probably the best kick returner I've ever seen. He is a superstar of the highest order in the NFL, Super Bowl champion, twice. But he said at Colorado last year, the only way he'd take an NFL job is if he could coach his son. Well, see, this is another problem. If you're a struggling team, and the Cleveland Browns will be a struggling team this year. And if who knows about Kevin Stefanski if his job is on the line? Probably if they have a poor record. Well, your coach is always going to be looking over his shoulder. Deion's going to be looking to replace him. And the more games you lose, and the more games Shedeur doesn't play well or doesn't play at all if he's not the starter, the owner's going to start thinking, well, maybe Deion could turn him around. Shedeur was pretty good at Colorado. Maybe he needs to play for his father. So I think a lot of coaches didn't want him because of the looming presence of Deion, lurking back there ready to take their jobs. That was probably another factor. Again, I just don't think he's good enough to comport himself the way he did in those pre-draft interviews. I like him. He's a good player. And I think he can be a good NFL player, and I'm pulling for him. And I wasn't in the room for these pre-draft interviews, and who knows. But he seems like a good kid when I've seen him interviewed. And I love Deion. I've interviewed Deion several times. I mean, he is a great guy. I always get a kick out of interviewing him. And again, you are listening now to the only man, the only media member in the United States who said when Lamar Jackson came out into the draft, he should be the number one pick by the Cleveland Browns, bar none. He will be the best quarterback out of all of them. And he went 32nd last in the first round of the Ravens, and I was on the air that day. I was saying that's a huge mistake. The NFL's made a colossal mistake. Josh Rosen goes number 10. Now, Josh Allen, yes, you can't blame Buffalo for taking him. He's been great. Baker Mayfield, some good years with Cleveland, then he kind of fell into the abyss, and now he's had a couple of really good years with Tampa Bay. He's bounced back nicely. He ain't Lamar Jackson. Nobody would take him over Lamar. So maybe you make a case of Sam Darnold's another one who went ahead of Lamar. Although he had a good year last year. Would anybody take him over Lamar Jackson? No. The only one you can make a case for maybe is Josh Allen. Other than that, I was proven correct that he should go for it. Remember, Cleveland had the first and the fourth picks that year. So maybe they should have gone, I think Saquon Barkley was in that draft, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you go Saquon 4 and Lamar 1. And now you're talking, or go Saquon 1, Lamar 4. Who knows? Oh, my goodness. But I was just sitting here laughing, listening to that dumbass Skip Bayless. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Shedeur Sanders proved everybody in the National Football League wrong. His magnificent, great performance proved that he can be an NFL star, and he should have been taken number 1 in the NFL draft. Tonight, Shedeur Sanders became a star. I was laughing once. Again, this is the same guy who said Tim Tebow was going to be an NFL Hall of Fame quarterback. The same guy that said when he was in high school, he was considered the next Pistol Pete Maravich as a basketball player. Remember that? And then Jalen Rose did some research and confronted him on the air the next day and found out that he never played higher than the JV team in high school. Remember? And Jalen said, Pistol Pete, you're water pistol, baby. Did you play on the JV, didn't you? He said, oh, yeah. He was humiliated. He went from considering himself the next Pistol Pete Maravich to a guy on the JV team in high school. Water pistol. Then Tim Tebow is the greatest quarterback of all time. Now, Shedeur Sanders proved everybody wrong with that great performance. And he should have been taken first in the National Football League draft. Yeah, I hope he does well. I hope everybody does well. I hope Shedeur goes on to a long and great career, wins a Super Bowl, makes a lot of money. Good for him. I want everybody to succeed. But to say that he proved everybody wrong, to say that he's ready for the Hall of Fame, that he's ready for a yellow jacket, that he should be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns based on one half of football against a Carolina Panthers team that was playing a bunch of scrubs. And again, a bunch of guys who will be working other jobs in 2 weeks and playing a basic vanilla defense. To say that he proved his greatness in a half of a practice game against a vanilla defense and some gas pumpers, it's just so ridiculous. The hype on Shedeur Sanders is absolutely unbelievable and ridiculous. Now, he's not going to play Saturday, evidently, against the Eagles. And I'll tell you the guy I like on that Cleveland Browns team. Now, I'm an Oregon Duck. I don't think Dylan Gabriel's an NFL quarterback. Joe Flacco's about 700 years old. I like Kenny Pickett a lot. I liked him at Pitt. I liked the little I saw of him with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think with the right coaching and getting a fresh start with a new organization, I think Kenny Pickett's good. I think he'll wind up being the starter there in Cleveland if he's healthy. I like Pickett. I always have. So we'll see. But who knows? Maybe Shedeur lights it up the rest of the preseason. Maybe he comes out, he plays well this year. Maybe the Browns have a good season, or maybe he'll be a bust. We just don't know. My goodness. Like I said, just retire now, Shedeur. We'll give you a yellow jacket, give you a bust, and enshrine you in Canton over a half of football against scrubs and vanilla defenses. See, this is why we hate the media. This is why we hate those woke cowards. And anybody who disagrees with you is a racist about Shedeur Sanders, just like with Lamar Jackson. Failing to mention that the first quarterback taken in the last 3 drafts was black. The first 2 quarterbacks taken in the last 2 drafts were black. 3 quarterbacks were taken in the first round in 2024 and 2023. 3 in the top 8 in 24, 3 in the top 4 in 23. So if the NFL is racist against black quarterbacks, they're the worst racists I've ever seen. They keep taking them high. They keep taking them with the first pick in the draft every year. Oh, look at that. We're already out of time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and make sure, comment, like, and give us a share. And if you want to know when Dave Smith is going to be on, who the guests are going to be, what day, what time I'm going to be on, always check me out on Twitter or X, @DaveSportsGod, @DaveSportsGod. We'll talk to you next time right here on Dave Smith Unleashed.